I dropped the phone. My hands were shaking so badly that it slipped right through my fingers and clattered onto the linoleum floor of our kitchen in Jacksonville. 7 months pregnant with twins, standing there in the house we'd bought together, watching a video I couldn't unsee. My husband Ryan, my paralyzed veteran husband who I'd spent the last 4 years caring for, who I'd quit my nursing career for, who I'd used my entire life savings to have children with through IVF, was at a gym, running on a treadmill, his legs pumping, his body strong and whole. No wheelchair in sight. The man who sent me the video was still on the line. I could hear his voice coming through the speaker, tinny and distant from where the phone had fallen. "Mrs. Patterson? You still there? I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but..." I couldn't breathe. The babies kicked hard against my ribs, as if they could sense something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. Let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here. To this moment, 7 months pregnant, and staring at proof that my entire marriage was built on a lie. 4 years ago, I was 30 years old, freshly divorced, and working as a nurse at the Veterans Affairs Hospital in Jacksonville, North Carolina. It's a military town, the kind of place where everyone either serves or knows someone who does. My ex-husband had been a Marine, and our marriage had lasted exactly 18 months before the deployment changed him into someone I didn't recognize. The divorce was quick, mutual, and left me feeling like I'd failed at the one thing I was supposed to be good at: loving someone. My mother kept calling, asking when I'd try again, as if marriage was a test you could retake. My friends were all having babies, posting pictures of gender reveals in nurseries, and I was working 12-hour shifts at the VA, coming home to a studio apartment that still had boxes I hadn't unpacked. That's when I met Ryan. He came into the hospital on a Tuesday morning, wheeling himself through the automatic doors with the kind of practiced ease that told me he'd been doing this for a while. He was 36, with dark hair starting to gray at the temples, and eyes that were somehow both weary and kind. He wore his dog tags outside his shirt, and had a purple heart tattooed on his left forearm. I was assigned to his case that day. He was there for a routine checkup, some issue with pressure sores that wheelchair users often develop. As I checked his vitals, he told me his story in that quiet, measured way that veterans have when they've told it too many times. He'd been injured in Afghanistan 3 years earlier. An IED had gone off during a patrol, killed 2 of his squad mates, left him paralyzed from the waist down. He'd spent a year in rehab, learning how to navigate the world from a wheelchair, dealing with PTSD and survivor's guilt, and the constant phantom pain in legs that no longer worked. "The hardest part," he said, looking down at his hands, "isn't the chair. It's the way people look at you. Like you're broken. Like you're less than." Something in his voice cracked open a part of me I'd been keeping carefully sealed. Here was someone who understood loss, who'd had his entire future ripped away and had to build something new from the wreckage. I felt like I understood him. Over the next few months, I kept finding excuses to be assigned to his appointments. We'd talk about everything: his service, my divorce, the books we were reading, the future we both thought we'd lost. He was funny in an unexpected way, making dry observations about the hospital bureaucracy that had me laughing in the supply closet. He never asked for pity, never used his disability as an excuse. He was just real. 6 months after we met, he asked me out. Well, he asked me if I'd want to grab coffee sometime, if you're not tired of looking at me in a hospital gown. I said yes before he'd even finished the sentence. Our first date was at a little cafe downtown that had a ramp entrance and wide aisles. I'd never dated someone in a wheelchair before, and I was nervous about saying or doing the wrong thing. But Ryan made it easy. He talked about his plans to go back to school for computer programming, about the accessible van he was saving up for, about his dreams that didn't include feeling sorry for himself. "Can I tell you something?" he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "When I first saw you at the hospital, I thought there's no way she'd be interested. Pretty girl like you could have anybody. Why would you want someone who can't even—" "Don't!" I interrupted. "Don't do that. You're not your wheelchair, Ryan." He smiled at me then, really smiled, and I felt something shift in my chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. We started dating officially after that. I'd drive to his apartment, a ground-floor unit he shared with another vet, and we'd cook dinner together, watch movies, talk until 2 in the morning. He lived on his VA disability pension, about $4,000 a month, which was enough to cover rent and basics but not much else. He'd applied to dozens of programming jobs but kept getting rejected. "They say it's not about the wheelchair," he told me one night, frustration thick in his voice. "But it's always about the wheelchair." I started staying over more nights than not. I learned how to help him transfer from his chair to the bed, how to adjust his cushions to prevent sores, how to be an extra set of hands when he needed them without making him feel helpless. His independence was important to him, fiercely so. He'd rather struggle for 20 minutes to reach something than ask for help. After a year, he asked me to move in with him. By then, I was already spending every free moment at his place anyway. It made sense. What didn't make sense, my mother said when I told her, was why I was settling for someone who couldn't give me a normal life. "He has PTSD, Jessica," she said over the phone, her voice tight with concern. "He's in a wheelchair. He can't work. Is this really what you want?" I hung up on her. I didn't talk to her for 3 months after that. Ryan and I got married 2 years after we met, at the courthouse with his army buddy Marcus and my friend Kate as witnesses. It was small, simple, and perfect. He looked at me like I was the best thing that had ever happened to him, and I felt the same way about him. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I quit my job at the VA hospital. Ryan needed full-time care help with physical therapy, managing his medications, dealing with the VA bureaucracy that seemed designed to wear people down. He'd been trying to get into a job training program for veterans with disabilities, but the wait list was 2 years long. His PTSD was getting worse, nightmares almost every night, panic attacks triggered by car backfires and loud noises. "I'll take care of you," I told him. "Let me take care of us." I picked up some part-time work doing home health visits, but mostly I focused on Ryan. I drove him to appointments, researched new treatments, fought with VA caseworkers who kept losing his paperwork. I watched our savings account dwindle slowly, month by month, but I told myself it was an investment in our future. Once he got into that training program, once he got a job, everything would be fine. We'd been married for 3 years when we started talking about having a baby. "Are you sure?" Ryan asked, his hand on my stomach like he was already imagining it growing. "It's a lot, with everything else, and I can't help the way other husbands could. I can't carry groceries or put together a crib or—" "Stop," I said, taking his face in my hands. "You're going to be an amazing father. The wheelchair doesn't change that." But there was a problem. Because of his injury, Ryan couldn't have children naturally. The doctors explained that spinal cord injuries often affect fertility, that we'd need to go through IVF if we wanted to get pregnant. IVF is expensive, crushingly expensive. Our insurance, my insurance from when I worked at the VA, had lapsed. The cheapest clinic we could find was still $40,000 for a single cycle, with no guarantee it would work. I had $52,000 left in my savings account. It was everything I'd been setting aside since I was 22, every extra shift and overtime hour and tax refund, my emergency fund, my retirement fund, my someday we'll buy a house fund. Ryan cried when I showed him the bank statement. "Jess, no. That's your money. That's your future. I can't let you. You're my future," I told him. "This baby is our future. We're doing this." We did 1 cycle. It didn't take. We did a 2nd cycle, using the last of my savings plus money I borrowed from Kate. The doctor called me on a Thursday afternoon in October. "Congratulations, Mrs. Patterson. You're pregnant. And according to the ultrasound, you're having twins." Twins, 2 babies, 2 miracles growing inside me, made possible by medical science and every dollar I'd saved for a decade. Ryan was ecstatic. He immediately started researching cribs and car seats and how to childproof a house for wheelchair accessibility. We moved into a small house with a ramp using credit cards to cover the deposit and started planning our future as a family of 4. I was 7 months pregnant when Marcus called. Marcus had served with Ryan in Afghanistan. He was one of the guys who'd pulled Ryan out of the burning vehicle after the IED went off, who'd held pressure on his wounds until the medevac arrived. They'd stayed close after Ryan's injury, but Marcus had moved to Virginia for work and we only saw him once or twice a year. "Jessica," he said, his voice strange and tight. "I need to talk to you. In person. Can you meet me? Is everything okay? Is it about Ryan? Just, can you meet me? There's a coffee shop on Lejeune Boulevard. I'm driving down today. Something in his tone made my stomach clench. Marcus, you're scaring me. What's going on? I'll be there at 3. Please come. I told Ryan I had a doctor's appointment. I don't know why I lied. Maybe some part of me already knew. Marcus was waiting for me at a corner table, and he looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, his coffee untouched, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. What is this about? I asked, lowering myself carefully into the chair. The twins were pressing on every organ at this point, making everything from sitting to breathing a careful negotiation. Marcus pulled out his phone. His hand was shaking. 6 months ago, Ryan called me asking for money. Said he was behind on bills, needed $5,000 to keep from getting evicted. I sent it to him because he's my brother, you know? We went through hell together. My chest tightened. Ryan hadn't mentioned any financial trouble. Okay. Then he called again 2 months later. Needed another $5,000. Said the VA had screwed up his pension and it would be sorted out soon. I sent it. Marcus, I don't understand. Last month he called again. Wanted $10,000 this time. I said no. I said he needed to figure out what was going on, that I couldn't keep bailing him out. He got angry. Real angry. Started saying things about how I owed him, how if I hadn't pulled him out of that vehicle, maybe he'd be better off dead. He didn't mean that, I said automatically, but my voice sounded hollow. He gets like that sometimes. The PTSD. Jessica. Marcus turned the phone toward me. I hired a private investigator. I'm sorry. I had to know what was going on with my money. On the screen was a video, timestamp from 3 weeks ago, a gym I didn't recognize, and there, on a treadmill in the back corner, was my husband. Not in a wheelchair, walking, running, his legs moving with perfect fluid strength. The video kept playing. Ryan got off the treadmill, grabbed a towel, walked over to the water fountain. No limp, no sign of injury. He moved like any other able-bodied man at a gym. There's more, Marcus said quietly. He swiped to another video. This one was from a parking lot. Ryan, walking out of a grocery store with bags in his hands. Getting into the driver's seat of a car, not his accessible van, just a regular sedan, and driving away. I couldn't speak. Couldn't think. The babies were kicking and I felt like I was going to be sick. The investigator did some digging, Marcus continued. Ryan was injured in Afghanistan. That part's true. But according to his medical records, he regained mobility after 6 months of physical therapy. He's been walking for 3 years. 3 years! Our entire relationship, our entire marriage. The VA disability pension, he gets $4,000 a month, that's for 100% disability rating. Permanent paralysis. He's been committing fraud, and he's been doing it while you... Marcus gestured at my swollen stomach. Jesus, Jess, while you spent everything you had to give him kids through IVF. I started crying then. Not the pretty kind of crying, but the ugly, gasping sobs that come from somewhere deep in your chest. The twins kicked harder, responding to my distress, and I wrapped my arms around my belly like I could protect them from this, from the truth that was tearing apart everything I thought I knew. I need to go home, I managed to say. Do you want me to come with you? You shouldn't be alone when... No, I need to. I need to think. I drove home in a daze, Marcus's words echoing in my head. 3 years. The entire time I'd been learning how to help him transfer, how to push his chair, how to fight with the VA for his benefits. The entire time I'd been working part-time jobs to make ends meet while he collected a pension for a disability he didn't have. The entire time I'd been using my life savings to have his children through IVF because his injury made it impossible. Ryan was in the living room when I got home, in his wheelchair, watching TV. He looked up and smiled. Hey, babe. How was the appointment? Everything okay with the twins? I stood in the doorway, my keys still in my hand, and just stared at him. This man I loved. This man I'd given everything for. Jess? You okay? You look pale. Do you need to sit down? Stand up, I said. What? Stand up, Ryan? His face changed. The smile vanished. What are you talking about? Marcus called me today. He showed me videos of you, walking, running, driving a car. My voice was shaking, but I kept going. Stand up. Right now, or I swear to God I'm walking out that door and you'll never see me or these babies again." For a long moment, he didn't move. Just sat there in that wheelchair, his hands gripping the armrests, his face completely white. Then, slowly, he stood up. He stood up. His legs were steady, strong. No trembling, no weakness. He stood there like standing was the most natural thing in the world, because it was. Because he'd been doing it for 3 years, while I believed he couldn't. "Jess, please, let me explain." "Explain?" The word came out as a shriek. "You want to explain? I quit my career for you. I used every penny I saved for a decade to have these babies because you said you couldn't, because the injury I couldn't finish the sentence. The betrayal was too big, too complete. I know it's bad. But just listen." "How long?" I demanded. "How long have you been lying to me?" He closed his eyes. "Since before we met. Since about 6 months after the injury. 6 months. I did the math in my head, felt the numbers stab into me like knives. We've been together 4 years, Ryan. 4 years. I was going to tell you. So many times, but you didn't." I was backing toward the door, my hand on my stomach, needing to put distance between us. "You let me quit my job. You let me spend everything I had. You watched me go through IVF. Do you have any idea what that's like? The hormones, the injections, the procedures, and the whole time you were lying. You could have gotten me pregnant the normal way, but you let me spend $50,000. "I couldn't tell you," he shouted, and I flinched. He saw it and his voice dropped. I'm sorry, but Jess, you have to understand. When I got out of the hospital, when I could walk again, I tried to go back to my unit. They wouldn't take me. Said I was psychologically unfit because of the PTSD. I applied to hundreds of jobs, and nobody would hire me, not even entry-level stuff. I had no income, no prospects, and the VA was offering me $4,000 a month if I maintained the disability rating. So you committed fraud. I survived! His voice broke. Do you know what it's like to lose everything? Your friends, your career, your purpose? The VA failed me, Jess. The system failed me. I'm a goddamn war hero, and I couldn't get a job at McDonald's. So yes, I took the money. I took it and I told myself I'd earned it, that I'd sacrificed enough. And me? I asked quietly. What about what I sacrificed? He crumpled then, actually crumpled, sinking back down into the wheelchair like it could hide him. I fell in love with you. That wasn't part of the plan. You were so kind, so dedicated to taking care of me, and I thought I'd tell you once we were serious, once you really knew me. But then I was afraid you'd leave. And then we got married and I was afraid you'd hate me. And then you wanted kids and I thought maybe this was my punishment, you know? Maybe this was karma, that I'd never have children because of what I'd done. But I had IVF, I said numbly. I spent everything, and you just let me. I tried to talk you out of it. I told you it was too expensive, that we should wait. But you didn't tell me the truth. You didn't give me the choice. We stood there, him in the wheelchair he didn't need, me 7 months pregnant with twins I'd paid a fortune for, and the silence between us was vast and terrible. I need you to leave, I finally said. Jess, please. Get out. Get out of this house. I can't even look at you right now. These are my babies too. You can't just... Your babies? The scream tore out of me. You mean the babies I paid for with my retirement fund? The babies I got through IVF because you lied about being able to have children naturally? Those babies? He was crying now, tears streaming down his face. I love you, and I love them. Please don't do this. You don't get to cry, I said coldly. You don't get to be the victim here. Get out. I'll send your stuff to wherever you're staying. Just get out. He left. He actually got up, walked to the bedroom, packed a bag, and left. Walked out the front door like the able-bodied man he was, got into a car I didn't know he owned, and drove away. I stood in the living room we'd furnished together and felt my whole world collapse. The next few weeks were a blur. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that video, saw Ryan running on the treadmill while I'd been at home organizing his medications. The twins kicked constantly, sensing my stress, and I talked to them in the dark, apologizing over and over for bringing them into this mess. Marcus called every day. Kate came over with groceries and prenatal vitamins and righteous fury on my behalf. My mother called finally to say she'd been right about him all along, which somehow made me feel worse rather than better. Ryan texted me constantly. Long, rambling messages about how sorry he was, how he'd do anything to make it right, how he loved me and needed me and couldn't lose us. I blocked his number after the 50th message, but I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. Marcus had hired a private investigator, which meant there was evidence. Video evidence of Ryan walking, driving, living a normal, able-bodied life while collecting disability payments. That wasn't just a relationship betrayal. That was federal fraud. I called Marcus. That investigator, does he still have all the footage? Yeah. Why? Because if Ryan has been committing VA fraud for 3 years, someone needs to report it. There was a long pause. Jess, if you report him, he'll go to prison. Federal prison. For years. I know. These are his babies too. They deserve a father. They deserve a father who doesn't lie, I shot back. They deserve a father who understands that actions have consequences. I didn't report him. Not yet. Instead, I did something I'd sworn I'd never do again after my divorce. I called a therapist. Her name was Dr. Reeves, and she specialized in trauma and betrayal. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense way of talking that I appreciated. "Tell me what brings you here," she said in our first session. So I told her. Everything. The whole sordid story from start to finish. When I was done, she sat back in her chair and studied me for a long moment. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "I want to go back in time and not be an idiot." "That's not an option." "So what do you want now? What would make you feel whole again?" I thought about it. I want him to face consequences. I want him to understand that what he did wasn't just about some VA paperwork. It was about me, about us, about the life I gave up believing in a lie. "Do you still love him?" The question caught me off guard. Did I? I loved who I thought he was. I loved the wounded veteran who'd been dealt a terrible hand and was doing his best with it. But that person didn't exist. That person had never existed. "I don't know," I admitted. "Sometimes I hate him. Sometimes I miss him so much I can't breathe. And sometimes I just feel sorry for him because he threw away something real for something fake." Dr. Reeves nodded. "Can I tell you what I see?" "Please." "I see 2 people who were hiding. He was hiding behind a false disability, using it as a shield against a world that rejected him. But you were hiding too, Jessica. You were hiding behind him." I started to protest, but she held up a hand. "Think about it. After your divorce, you were hurt. You felt like you'd failed. And then you found someone who needed you in the most essential, undeniable way. Someone who couldn't survive without you. That's seductive, isn't it? Being needed that much? It's safer than being wanted. Wanted can go away. But needed. I felt like she'd reached into my chest and pulled something out I didn't know was there. I wasn't using him. No, but you were using the situation. You quit your career not just for him, but to avoid the question of what you wanted from your own life. You spent all your savings, not just to have his babies, but to bind yourself to someone in the most permanent way possible. Because if you're taking care of someone else, you don't have to take care of yourself. I cried through the rest of that session, ugly, snotty crying that made the receptionist give me concerned looks on my way out. But Dr. Reeves was right. I'd been hiding too. I'd been so focused on being the selfless caregiver, the understanding wife, the woman who didn't judge, that I'd never stopped to ask myself what I actually wanted, and I'd resented Ryan for it, even before I knew the truth. Resented him for needing so much, for taking up all the oxygen in the room with his trauma and his chair and his limitations. Except they weren't limitations, they were lies. 2 weeks later, Ryan showed up at the house. "Don't close the door," he said quickly when he saw my expression. "Please, just 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." I stepped back and let him in, mostly because I was too tired to fight. The twins were due in 3 weeks, and I felt like a whale that had been beached on dry land. He didn't sit down, just stood in the middle of the living room, looking at me like I was going to disappear. "I turned myself in," he said. "What?" "To the VA. To the Inspector General's office." I confessed everything. The fraud, the false disability rating, all of it. He pulled out a paper and handed it to me. I'm being charged with theft of government funds and fraud. My lawyer says I'm looking at 2 to 5 years in federal prison. I stared at the document, at his signature at the bottom. Why would you do that? Because you were right. Because what I did was wrong, and not just to you. To every actual disabled veteran who needs those benefits. To the system. To myself. He ran a hand through his hair. And because I couldn't let you carry this. If you reported me, you'd have to testify. You'd have to be part of sending me away. I couldn't do that to you. Not on top of everything else. I didn't know what to say. I know you probably won't believe this, he continued, his voice thick with emotion, but I do love you. I have loved you from the moment you laughed at my stupid joke about hospital gowns. Everything else was a lie, but that was real. You were the realest thing in my life. The twins kicked, hard, and I winced. Ryan saw it and moved toward me instinctively, then caught himself. Are they okay? Are you okay? We're fine, I said, but my hand went to my stomach, rubbing the spot where a tiny foot was pressing against my ribs. I want to be there, he said quietly. When they're born. I know I don't have the right to ask, but I want to be there. I want to meet them before I have to go away. You're going to prison, Ryan. For years. These babies are going to grow up without their father. I know. His voice broke. And that's going to be my punishment. Not the prison time. That. Missing their first words, their first steps, their birthdays. Missing you. I felt something crack inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something softer than the rage that had been consuming me. Dr. Reeves says I was hiding too, I heard myself say. That I used you as much as you used me. That I wanted someone to need me so I didn't have to figure out what I needed. He looked at me, surprise evident on his face. You've been seeing a therapist? Yeah. Turns out having your entire life revealed as a lie is traumatic. Who knew? The sarcasm was automatic, a defense mechanism. I'm glad, he said simply. You deserve support. You deserve everything. We stood there in the silence. Two people who'd loved each other through lies, trying to figure out if there was anything true left to salvage. I need time, I finally said. I need to figure out who I am without you, without being your caregiver. I need to have these babies and learn how to be their mother. And I need to be angry at you. I've earned the right to be angry. I know, but when they're born. I took a breath. When they're born, I'll call you. You can meet them. And then you'll go to prison. And I'll figure out how to explain to two kids why their father isn't around. And maybe, someday, when you've served your time and actually faced consequences for what you did, we can talk about whether there's anything left between us. Hope flickered across his face. You mean that? I don't know what I mean. But those babies deserve to know their father, even if he's a liar and a fraud. So yeah, you can meet them. He started crying then, and I let him. I didn't comfort him, didn't cross the distance between us. I just stood there, 7 months pregnant, and watched him break. When he left, he walked out the door like he'd always been able to walk. But this time, I knew the truth. And somehow, that made all the difference. The twins were born 3 weeks later, a boy and a girl. I named them Carter and Grace, after no one in particular, just names that felt like fresh starts. Ryan was there when they were born. He stood next to my bed, stood, not sat, and held his daughter for the first time with tears streaming down his face. He whispered to them in a voice I'd never heard him use, full of wonder and regret and desperate love. I'm so sorry, he told them. I'm so sorry I won't be there for your first everything, but I want you to know that you were wanted. You were so wanted. 3 days after I brought the twins home, Ryan reported to begin his sentence. 2 years, with good behavior. The judge had been lenient because of his service record and his voluntary confession. 2 years of raising twins alone. 2 years of no sleep and double diapers and figuring out how to be a single mother. 2 years of wondering if I'd made the right choice, letting him meet them, giving him a sliver of hope for the future. Kate moved in with me for the first 6 months. She'd take the night shift while I slept, would hand me babies to feed, would tell me I was doing great even when I was crying into my coffee at 3 a.m. because Grace wouldn't stop screaming and Carter had a fever and I was so tired. "You're a warrior," she'd tell me. "You're doing this." I went back to therapy every week. Dr. Reeves helped me untangle the mess of my feelings, helped me see that loving Ryan and being angry at him weren't mutually exclusive, that I could grieve the relationship we'd had while acknowledging it was built on sand. "Forgiveness isn't about him," she told me in one session, while I bounced a fussy Grace on my knee. "It's about you. It's about putting down the weight of his betrayal so you can move forward." I wrote Ryan letters sometimes, but I didn't send them. I'd tell him about how Carter smiled at exactly 8 weeks, how Grace gripped my finger with shocking strength, how they both had his eyes and it broke my heart every time I looked at them. I'd tell him I was angry, that I was struggling, that some days I couldn't believe he'd done this to us. But I also wrote about the other thing Dr. Reeves had helped me see, that I'd learned sign language for a man who could hear, but in doing so, I'd learned something about myself. That I was capable of deep commitment, of selfless love, of learning hard things for the sake of someone else. That wasn't wasted, even if the reason for it was a lie. "You chose to be kind," Dr. Reeves said. "You chose to be understanding. That speaks to who you are, not who he is. He lied about his disability, but you didn't lie about your character." 6 months into his sentence, Ryan was allowed a visitor. I brought the twins. He looked different, thinner, grayer, older. But when he saw Carter and Grace, his whole face transformed. I let him hold them, one in each arm, and I took a picture on my phone. For them, someday, when they asked about their father, "They're perfect," he whispered. "God, Jess, they're so perfect." "They are," I agreed. "No thanks to you." He flinched but didn't argue. "How are you? Really?" "I'm tired. I'm angry. I'm broke because apparently IVF doesn't come with a refund policy." I paused. "But I'm also okay. Better than okay, some days. I got my nursing license reinstated. I'm working part-time. Kate's helping. My mom actually apologized for the first time in her life. So, yeah, we're surviving." "I'm so sorry," he said again, for probably the 1,000th time. "I know you are. But Ryan, sorry doesn't pay the bills. Sorry doesn't change what happened. Sorry is just a word. What can I do? Serve your time. Face what you did. And when you get out, be honest. Be the father these kids deserve, not the one who lied for years." He nodded, kissing each baby's head before handing them back to me. "I'll be out in 18 months if my behavior stays good. And when I am, I'll spend the rest of my life making this right. I promise." "Don't promise," I said tiredly. "Just do it." That was a year ago. Ryan's getting out in 6 months, and I still don't know what our future looks like. Some days I think about divorce lawyers and custody agreements and starting completely over. Other days, I think about Dr. Reeves's words about hiding, and I wonder if maybe Ryan and I could build something real now that all the lies are gone. The twins are 18 months old now. Carter is walking and Grace is close behind. They're chaos and joy and exhaustion personified. And they're mine. Not ours, not yet, maybe not ever, but they're mine. And I made them possible, and that matters. I saw Marcus last week. He apologized for the 100th time for being the one to tell me the truth. "Don't," I said, watching the twins destroy my carefully organized bookshelf. "You gave me a choice. That's more than Ryan ever did. Are you going to let him back in? When he gets out?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Ask me in 6 months. But here's what I do know. I quit my job for the wrong reasons, but it taught me what I'm capable of. I spent my life savings for the wrong reasons, but it gave me Carter and Grace. I learned to be a caregiver for a lie, but it showed me I'm strong enough to survive the truth. Ryan took a lot from me. My career, my money, my trust. But he couldn't take who I am underneath all of that. He couldn't take my ability to love, even when it's hard. He couldn't take my capacity to forgive, even when forgiveness feels impossible. I'm 63 now, telling you this story. Carter and Grace are grown, with children of their own. And Ryan? He got out of prison 28 years ago. We went to therapy together for 2 years. We didn't get back together right away. It took time, and work, and 1,000 small moments of choosing to trust again. We're still married. I won't tell you it was easy. I won't tell you I don't sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and feel that cold fury all over again. But I'll tell you this. The man who walks next to me now is not the man who lied. He's the man who faced what he did, who rebuilt himself from the ground up, who learned that being vulnerable is harder and braver than any lie. Some betrayals changed 2 lives forever. Mine changed 3, or 5 if you count the twins. But change doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it means demolition, clearing away the false foundation so you can build something real. That note I dropped all those years ago? I never finished writing it. It was going to say, I can't do this anymore. But standing there, 7 months pregnant, watching that video of my husband walking, I realized I didn't need to write it down. The truth was already out there, unavoidable and devastating, and somehow, eventually, freeing. The truth will always find the worst moment to surface. But once it does, once you stop hiding behind what's comfortable and face what's real, that's when you can finally start to heal. That's my story. Make of it what you will.